What if some of the best science fiction of the 1970s never really got the audience it deserved? The decade gave us bold ideas, clunky effects, and shows that burned out way too fast. But hidden behind the canceled schedules and forgotten VHS tapes are gems that deserve another shot. Some were too weird, others too expensive, and a few were simply ahead of their time. And once you hear these, you'll wonder why they're still collecting dust. Space. 1999, 1975, 1977. Imagine the moon blasted out of Earth's orbit and sent drifting across the galaxy, carrying a colony of humans trapped on a lunar base. That was the premise of Space. 1999, a show so ambitious it felt like a big-budget movie every week. Created in Britain by Jerry and Sylvia Anderson, it carried the same sleek design DNA of their earlier puppet-based classics, but this time with live actors, futuristic sets, and a sense of cosmic awe. The series followed Commander John Koenig and the crew of Moonbase Alpha as they encountered strange worlds, alien civilizations, and cosmic mysteries. What set it apart wasn't just the scale, but the tone. It was eerie, moody, and filled with episodes that questioned humanity's place in the universe. Critics at the time complained it was too slow or too serious compared to the campy fun of Star Trek. But looking back, its deliberate pacing feels almost hypnotic, like a sci-fi tone poem. Visually, Space 1999 was stunning. The model-work spaceships and sets rivaled Hollywood movies of the day. The iconic Eagle transporters are still considered some of the best spacecraft designs ever put on screen. And let's not forget the haunting musical score that shifted from bombastic to unsettling in a heartbeat. So why does this show deserve a second chance? Because modern audiences finally appreciate slow-burn storytelling. In an era of binge-worthy series, a reboot of Space 1999 could thrive. It was dismissed in its own time for being too cerebral, too ambitious, but those are exactly the qualities that could make it shine today. If streaming platforms can resurrect Battlestar Galactica, they could certainly give Space 1999 another orbit around the stars. Logan's Run, 1977-1978. What happens after you hit 30 and society decides your time is up? That was the chilling premise of Logan's Run, first introduced in the 1976 movie and then adapted into a short-lived TV series the following year. While the film became a cult classic, the show never found its footing. But beneath the rough edges was a concept that still feels ripe for exploration. The series followed Logan 5, a Sandman, turned fugitive, and his companion Jessica as they fled the domed city of domes to search for sanctuary, a mythical safe haven for those who refused to accept their society's brutal cutoff. Joining them was a loyal android named Rem, who often provided wisdom and comic relief. Each episode was essentially a road trip through a ruined future Earth, encountering strange societies, tyrants, and survivors clinging to old-world ideals. What held the show back? Budget, mostly. The film's spectacular sets and effects were impossible to replicate on a weekly TV schedule. Episodes often looked recycled and the scope shrank compared to the original cinematic vision. But if you look past the cheap sets, the themes were razor-sharp. Questions about youth obsession, government control, and what freedom really means gave the series a surprising depth. And let's be honest, Logan and Jessica's journey was basically The Fugitive in a sci-fi skin, but that made it accessible. Imagine this format revived today with high production values, sharp writing, and a willingness to push the dystopian themes even further. Audiences who loved shows like The Handmaid's Tale or Black Mirror would eat this up. The truth is, Logan's Run was too bold for late-night network television in the 70s. But in the right hands today, its chilling vision of a world obsessed with youth could feel both nostalgic and uncomfortably relevant. It deserves a second chance, if only to remind us that sometimes running is the only way to survive. The Starlost, 1973-1974. What do you get when you combine a genius idea, a shoestring budget, and a production cursed from the start? You get The Starlost. Conceived by science fiction legend Harlan Ellison, this Canadian series promised a sprawling epic about a massive, generational spaceship drifting through space, its crew divided into domed societies that had forgotten their true mission. On paper, it sounded revolutionary. In execution, it became one of the strangest TV oddities of the decade. The story followed Devin, Rachel, and Garth, three young people from a strict agrarian dome who stumble upon the truth. Their world is just one of many sealed habitats inside a colossal starship called the Ark. Worse, the ship is damaged and heading toward destruction. Their mission was to travel from dome to dome, searching for the bridge and someone who could steer the vessel to safety. The problem? Ambition met reality. The Starlost was supposed to be filmed using state-of-the-art visual effects technology, but budget cuts forced the producers to rely on cheap sets, awkward costumes, and primitive effects that made even 70s Doctor Who look polished. Ellison was so frustrated, he took his name off the credits, replacing it with the infamous pseudonym Cordwainer Bird. Yet despite the clunky execution, the core idea is still brilliant. A massive starship filled with forgotten societies? That's essentially Snowpiercer in space. The concept was decades ahead of its time, and you can easily imagine how a modern streaming service could reimagine it with cutting-edge visuals and layered storytelling. The Starlost deserves a second chance because its DNA was pure sci-fi gold. It failed not because of its ideas, but because of the lack of resources to realize them. Give this show to a team with imagination and money, and suddenly the Ark doesn't look like a clunky set. It becomes the ultimate sci-fi playground. Planet of the Apes, 1974. You'd think anything tied to Planet of the Apes would be unstoppable in the 70s. After all, the original films had already proven themselves as box office juggernauts. But the short-lived TV spin-off in 1974 barely made it through a single season. Was it a disaster? Not really. It just needed more time. The show picked up the central premise of the films. Astronauts from 20th century Earth crash on a future planet where apes rule and humans are second class. The twist in the series was that two human astronauts, Alan Verdon and Pete Burke, survived the crash and went on the run aided by a sympathetic chimpanzee named Galen, played with warmth and wit by Roddy McDowall, yes, the same actor who became the face of the entire franchise. Week after week, the trio journeyed through ape-controlled territories, encountering corrupt leaders, human rebels, and the constant threat of capture. It had the structure of a classic Western but dressed in ape costumes and dystopian landscapes. The makeup and production values carried over from the films were impressive. The writing, a little uneven but full of potential. So why did it flop? Timing. Audiences may have been burned out after 5 films in quick succession, and television budgets simply couldn't sustain the spectacle audiences expected. Yet the show wasn't lacking in ideas. It explored questions of freedom, loyalty, and survival in a world turned upside down. With today's appetite for expansive universes and serialized storytelling, this forgotten show could absolutely work again. Imagine a gritty reboot that dives deeper into the ape society, with long-form arcs and world-building that the 70s could only dream of. The franchise has already been revived in films. It's time the TV version got another swing. Quark, 1977-1978. Not every science fiction show has to be dark and brooding. Some of them go straight for the laugh track. Quark was NBC's attempt to parody Star Trek and the sci-fi boom of the 70s. And while it didn't last long, it carved out a small cult following that still remembers its ridiculous charm. Created by Buck Henry, who co-created Get Smart Quark, followed the misadventures of Adam Quark, a space garbage collector whose thankless job was cleaning up debris across the galaxy. Sounds glamorous, right? His crew was a motley bunch. Gene and Jean, identical-looking clones who constantly bickered. Ficus, a Spock-like plant humanoid who lacked emotions. And Betty and Betty, who were literally identical women, referred to as the Bettys. Add in a neurotic robot named Andy, and you had the most dysfunctional starship crew imaginable. The humor was broad campy and absolutely self-aware. Quark dealt with everything from intergalactic bureaucrats to cosmic misunderstandings, poking fun at the tropes of space adventures. Think of it as the 70s answer to what the Orville does now, except sillier and with disco-era production design. Why does it deserve a second chance? Because parody ages surprisingly well. In the age of streaming, audiences love meta-humor and genre send-ups. Quark was trying to do what Galaxy Quest did years later, lampoon science fiction while secretly celebrating it. Unfortunately, the show aired during a weird scheduling shuffle, and viewers never quite figured out what it wanted to be. Today, a revival of Quark could easily land with fans who enjoy the Office-style comedy mixed with sci-fi absurdity. It was misunderstood in its day, but the core idea, a workplace comedy in space, feels more relevant than ever. If we can laugh at superheroes in Deadpool or Jedi jokes on TikTok, then surely we're ready to give a second chance to the Starship crew whose main mission was literally picking up trash. The Fantastic Journey, 1977. What happens when a simple pleasure cruise turns into a nightmare of time warps and alternate dimensions? That's the hook of The Fantastic Journey, a short-lived but wildly imaginative NBC show from 1977. It opened with a yacht lost in the Bermuda Triangle, sucked into a glowing vortex, and deposited in a bizarre world where time and space had collapsed into a patchwork of eras. Roman sorcerers, futuristic scientists, they were all living side by side. At the center of this chaos was a ragtag group of survivors. Dr. Fred Walters, his son Scott Adventurer Varian, played by a pre-Deep Space Nine Roddy McDowall, and a mysterious alien named Liana with psychic powers. Each week, the crew wandered from one strange zone to another, searching for a way back home. Sometimes they encountered utopian societies, other times brutal warlords, and always the Bermuda Triangle shimmered in the background as a reminder of the trap they'd fallen into. Critics never knew what to make of it. Was it sci-fi? Was it fantasy? Was it a kid's adventure show or a deep philosophical allegory? The truth is, it was all of those things at once. The production values were low, but the ideas were ambitious, exploring themes like destiny, morality, and what it means to find home when reality itself is unstable. Why does it deserve a second chance? Because the concept was pure gold. The Bermuda Triangle as a gateway to multiverses is the kind of premise modern audiences would binge without blinking. With today's effects and storytelling chops, you could reimagine The Fantastic Journey as a sweeping, serialized epic. Back in the 70s, it was too weird for mainstream audiences. Today, weird is exactly what works. Future Cop, 1976-1977. Before RoboCop, before Data, there was Future Cop. This forgotten ABC show imagined what would happen if a grizzled police officer was suddenly paired with a humanoid android partner. It sounds like a cliche now, but in 1976, it was cutting-edge television. The show starred veteran actor Ernest Borgnine as veteran cop Joe Cleaver stuck training a rookie named Haven. Except Haven wasn't human. He was a prototype android designed to be the perfect officer. Tall, awkward, and constantly trying to fit in, Haven was played by Michael Shannon, with just the right mix of stiffness and charm. The dynamic was classic buddy cop banter, with Cleaver trying to teach Haven not just how to enforce laws, but how to understand people. Episodes tackled everything from hostage situations to undercover work, but always with the twist of Haven, learning how to process emotions, ethics, and human quirks. The show was surprisingly lighthearted, often poking fun at the android's lack of social skills. But underneath the comedy, it asked sharp questions. Can technology ever really understand humanity? Should machines be allowed to make life or death decisions? Future Cop was axed after only a handful of episodes, partly due to legal disputes over its similarity to a script by science fiction writers Harlan Ellison and Ben Bova. But its DNA lived on influencing everything from RoboCop to Alien Nation. In today's age of artificial intelligence debates, Future Cop feels almost prophetic. Imagine a reboot that blends humor with modern anxieties about AI policing surveillance and human empathy. This show wasn't just ahead of its time, it was practically shouting warnings from the future. And now that future has arrived. Man from Atlantis, 1977-1978. Picture this. Patrick Duffy, before his Dallas fame, swimming through the ocean with webbed hands and feet, breathing underwater and staring at the surface world with wide-eyed innocence. That's Man from Atlantis, a cult favorite that straddled the line between superhero origin story and ecological sci-fi fable. The series began as a set of TV movies before spinning into a weekly show. Duffy played Mark Harris, the sole survivor of a mysterious underwater civilization. Found washed ashore with no memory of his past, Mark was recruited by the Foundation for Oceanic Research to help explore the mysteries of the deep. With superhuman strength-enhanced swimming abilities and sonar-like senses, he became humanity's ambassador to the sea. Episodes threw him against mad scientists, undersea monsters, and environmental disasters. Some stories were campy giant jellyfish, glowing alien artifacts, but others tapped into deeper themes about our relationship with nature and the cost of exploiting the oceans. Duffy's earnest, almost alien performance gave the character a gentle nobility that stuck with fans long after the show was canceled. Why does it deserve a second chance? Because it anticipated the environmental movement of the 80s and 90s. Today, with climate change and ocean conservation dominating headlines, Man from Atlantis feels more relevant than ever. Imagine a reboot that takes the ecological themes seriously while still delivering pulpy undersea adventures with modern effects. The original series may look dated, but its heart was in the right place. Patrick Duffy's watery hero was ahead of his time, and audiences today are finally ready for a story that dives beneath the waves and asks, what if the last hope for the planet came not from the stars, but from the sea itself? Ark II, 1976-1979. Picture a post-apocalyptic Earth where pollution and greed have pushed humanity to the brink. Out of this wasteland rolls Ark II, a futuristic super vehicle piloted by a small team dedicated to rebuilding civilization. Premiering in 1976 on Saturday mornings, this was a children's show with surprisingly heavy themes. The Ark itself was unforgettable. A massive, sleek mobile laboratory complete with gadgets, a jetpack, and even a chimpanzee crew member named Adam. The crew consisted of Jonah Ruth and Samuel, three young scientists tasked with traveling across the devastated Earth to spread knowledge, help survivors, and undo the mistakes of past generations. Each episode was essentially a morality tale, but wrapped in sci-fi adventure. Yes, the production values were cheap. Yes, the costumes looked like leftovers from a high school play. But the imagination was undeniable. One week, they were battling primitive warlords. The next, they were teaching children about equality science or cooperation. It was part Mad Max, part Star Trek filtered through Saturday morning television. What makes Ark II ripe for a revival is how much its premise mirrors today's headlines. Environmental collapse? Check. Societies fractured by inequality? Double check. The idea of a group of young idealists trying to fix the mistakes of their elders couldn't feel more relevant. With modern special effects, this concept could easily evolve into a gripping young adult adventure series. Ark II may have been designed to teach kids simple lessons, but beneath the clunky scripts was a bold vision. Humanity doesn't have to stay broken. That's a message worth dusting off the Ark and sending it rolling again. Project U.F.O, 1978-1979. Long before the X-Files made conspiracy culture cool, Project U.F.O was quietly paving the way. Inspired by real-life government investigations into unidentified flying objects, this NBC series dramatized cases pulled from official Air Force files. Airing from 1978 to 1979, it was part procedural, part documentary, and all atmosphere. The show followed two Air Force investigators, Major Jake Gatlin and Staff Sergeant Harry Fitz, as they interviewed witnesses, examined evidence, and tried to determine whether sightings were explainable or something stranger. Each episode ended with the official conclusion, often noting "case unresolved." The tone was serious, almost documentary-like, with a chilling narration that made even the most mundane sightings feel mysterious. While critics dismissed it as dry kids and sci-fi fans were hooked, the combination of eerie special effects, glowing saucers, and what-if scenarios captured imaginations at a time when UFO fever was gripping the culture. It wasn't flashy, but it was creepy in the best way. Why does it deserve a second chance? Because audiences today love docudrama hybrids. Imagine this concept reborn as a modern anthology series blending dramatized encounters with real testimony, something like Unsolved Mysteries, but with a laser focus on the skies. With today's renewed fascination in UFOs, thanks to official military disclosures and viral footage, the timing couldn't be better. Project U.F.O didn't last long, but it left a mark. It showed that sci-fi didn't always need aliens to be scary. The possibility alone was enough. And now, in an age where unexplained aerial phenomena is part of the news cycle, this forgotten gem is screaming for revival. Gemini Man, 1976. Take one part spy thriller, one part superhero story, and sprinkle in a bit of 70s cheese, and you've got Gemini Man. This NBC series followed Sam Casey, a government agent who gained the ability to turn invisible after being exposed to radiation. His new condition came with a catch. He could only stay invisible for 15 minutes at a time, or his body would start breaking down. Played by Ben Murphy, Casey became a secret weapon for the government's Intersect Security Agency. Each week, he used his powers to infiltrate enemy bases, rescue hostages, or stop sabotage plots, all while keeping one eye on the clock. To visualize his powers, the show leaned on clever camera tricks and 70s-era effects. Floating guns, doors opening on their own, and Casey vanishing into thin air with a shimmering glow. The premise had promise, but the show struggled. Critics felt it was too similar to earlier hits like The Invisible Man. And let's face it, special effects of the 70s couldn't really sell invisibility without looking a little hokey. Despite this, the series had charm thanks to Murphy's easygoing charisma and the ticking clock tension baked into every mission. Why bring it back? Because invisibility is still one of the most fascinating superpowers. Done right, it's terrifying, dramatic, and full of potential for suspense. Imagine a modern version of Gemini Man with cutting-edge effects, grounded espionage storytelling, and that same tension of 15 minutes or else. It could easily become a sleek, binge-worthy thriller. Gemini Man was a victim of its era, an idea too good for the budget it was given. But with today's resources, this invisible agent deserves to step back into the light. Kolchak, the Night Stalker, 1974-1975. Sometimes the shows that get canceled too soon become the most influential of all. That's exactly what happened with Kolchak, the Night Stalker. Running for just one season between 1974 and 1975, this cult series followed reporter Carl Kolchak, played brilliantly by Darren McGavin, as he investigated bizarre crimes that always turned out to have supernatural or science fiction twists. Vampires, werewolves, aliens, you name it, Kolchak ran into it armed only with his notebook, his camera, and a whole lot of sarcasm. What made the show special wasn't just the monsters, though. It was Kolchak himself. Unlike the slick heroes of other sci-fi or detective shows, Carl was a rumpled, wisecracking underdog. He wasn't trying to save the world, he was just trying to get his story, usually, while his skeptical editor rolled his eyes. That everyman quality made him relatable, and his constant bad luck made the show both funny and genuinely tense. Despite its short run, Kolchak went on to inspire a whole generation of storytellers. Most famously, Chris Carter has openly said it was the direct blueprint for the X-Files. You can see the DNA, an investigator stumbling across paranormal cases, a skeptical boss, and stories that blur the line between horror, sci-fi, and noir. So why does Kolchak deserve a second chance? Because the concept is timeless. A scrappy reporter digging into stories that no one else believes? That works in any era. In today's world of fake news, conspiracy theories, and fringe podcasts, a modern Kolchak could thrive. He doesn't need laser guns or superpowers, just grit, wit, and an instinct for trouble. This was the show that proved sci-fi doesn't always need spaceships. Sometimes the strangest stories are lurking in the shadows of your own city. And after all these years, Carl Kolchak still deserves to chase them. The 1970s may have been full of clunky effects and quick cancellations, but buried inside that decade were brilliant ideas that deserve a fresh shot. From space parodies to eerie UFO cases, these shows were weird, wonderful, and way ahead of their time. Which one do you think deserves a reboot first? Drop your pick in the comments, hit subscribe, and share this with your fellow sci-fi fans. After all, second chances are what great stories are made of.